Hey everybody, I hope you're having a fantastic day. I've got a different kind of product here. And just to give you a little backstory, I remember just clear as day for some reason. I was working in my shop in Alaska and I was listening to some podcasts, and several times in one day I heard people talk about Microsoft is open sourcing a bunch of IoT stuff, and that obviously piqued my interest, but I never really got back to it, never really thought a whole lot about it. It just seemed like kind of an un-Microsoft-y thing to do. So I wanted to give you my impressions of this kit and talk a little bit about what it does and what it is and why you might want it. So opening up the box, I've obviously opened this before, is the actual board. I'll set that aside for a second. And there's not much in the box. It just comes with a piece of foam, a little bit of an instruction getting started guide, a USB cable, and some rubber feet. So the thing you mainly care about is the board. So we're going to clear everything else out. And this board is kind of different. It is the first thing that stuck out to me is that these pin headers looked mighty familiar. And I don't know that I've actually posted a video about this, but this is actually the same form factor as a BBC Microbit. And BBC Microbit was a board that was designed by the Brits to give out to all of their students and get them interested in coding. And so this is a very cool board, and there's a ton of accessories and things like that for development based on this form factor, and they decided to make this form factor compatible. Now obviously you have to write your own code, but for instance, I have this BBC Microbit robot, and I can plug this board right in the same slot that I was able to plug my BBC Microbit, and you can drive the GPIOs and everything like that through that little connector. So I think that was a good idea to use an existing form factor. And so this board is primarily aimed at development, but it has a lot of enterprise grade features. So let's take a look at it. The first thing that sticks out is this giant MX chip, which is basically the Wi-Fi chip. It's an MX EMW3166. And so this handles all the Wi-Fi duties. Coming around here we have headphone jack and infrared sender and a USB port, USB 2.0. Now one of the interesting things about this USB port, which is a little weird for Arduino people, but this is actually a USB OTG device, which means that when you plug this in, it's going to show up as a thumb drive basically, and you can transfer data straight just back and forth. Just copy your bin files, your already compiled files, over to it and store files on this thing, and it basically becomes a normal USB device when you plug it in, like a storage device. We have a reset pin over here, a reset button over here. There is a microphone, and there are some various LEDs scattered around here. And then this right here is the main chip, and this is an STM32 chip. It is the what is it? It's the F412 STM32 chip, and basically this is the let me say that again. This is designed to be the lower end of a very high-end set of microcontrollers, and so it's sort of made to be a foot in the door, where if you develop on this, you can port your code to something that's going to have even more powerful. Well, this is no slouch. In terms of megahertz, it sits between an ESP32 and an ESP8266, clocking it at 100 megahertz with 256K of RAM, and they call it 1/2 megs of storage. But this is no slouch of a chip, and basically if you develop for this, you can continue to to develop further. So there's also 4 pogo pins over here that aren't labeled, or 4 pogo pin pads over here that aren't labeled. Continuing our tour, it has physical A and B buttons, as well as an OLED screen and RGB LED, some status LEDs over here, a dedicated security chip, a magnetometer, an accelerometer and gyroscope, humidity sensor, temperature sensor, pressure sensor. Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting stuff on this board. Now, this CPU, to go back for that for a second, it has 4 UARTs, 5 SPIs, 4 I2Cs, 2 CAN bus, has SDIO. As I said before, it has the USB on the go. It also has something really interesting called a batch acquisition mode. And basically what this board from the ground up is designed to be low power and low power consuming. And so you can actually interact with the I/O parts of the board without actually waking the rest of the chip up, the rest of the board up, which is pretty interesting concept. The other thing this has is a true random number generator. And I don't know if you've ever tried to just run the random number generator on like an Arduino. Every time you boot up the Arduino, you'll get the exact same results. And there are some tricks you can do, and you can try to do some seeding and try to grab some random noise and stuff like that through the analog pins and stuff, but they are not even close to, I wouldn't even really call it a pseudo random number generator. It's kind of a predictable random number generator, and this has a true random number generator. Now, why do you care? Well, I mean, everything based on crypto, everything in crypto, everything in having to do with security relies on having a good source of truly random numbers, of truly random entropy. And so having that baked into the chip is pretty solid. So what's the deal with this board? What makes this so different? So in addition to all the stuff that's just kind of baked on the board, this is designed from the ground up to work with Microsoft Azure. Now, before I go ranting on about a lot of things I don't know, I'm going to say I'm not a Microsoft Azure fan. I don't use it. I've played with it. I have an account, but I am not an expert on Microsoft Azure. But what I did do was I decided to go in there and look at it and see what this thing actually did to see why you might want it. And so one of the interesting things is we get the question over and over and over again in our Facebook group. I want to make a commercial product. I want to make a product for my company based on Arduino. And the thing that people are missing when it comes to that, it's not that your Arduino board can't turn the little LED on and off, or, it's not that you can't make it connect to the internet. But when you want to get into actual IoT deployment, you want the concept of managed deployment. You want the concept of being able to put out 100 devices like this and be able to patch them for security and push out updates and store the data centrally and, truly authenticate who is sending the data, who you're sending it to and all that kind of stuff. And that really is where this platform shines. This platform is made for people who want to take devices like this and deploy them in an environment that has some control to it. And if you've used any of Microsoft products, you know that the way they do things is you can push this stuff out and you can lock it down, and you can just have this central management experience that there really isn't something very good like that in the Arduino world. And so, I will say Andreas Spiess has his IoT app story and the ability to push out updates and stuff like that, and that's coming along and all that stuff. But this is enterprise grade central management. And so this board is absolutely not for everybody. This is not made for just blinking an LED, although, I was able to get it to run with the Arduino IDE and program the screen and do all that kind of stuff. Like, I was able to get it to work and do those things, and I even got it to connect to Azure. But this is not made for just blinking an LED and seeing if you could get some text on the screen. This is for serious development and deployment. This is for if you have a project where you want to put out a whole bunch of IoT devices and manage them and make sure they're secured, then you may want to look into something like this. So I guess the question is, what would you do with it? What kind of project would you take on with it? If we sent you this board, or if Plugable sent you another board, like, what would you do with it? And let me hear about it in the comments. Let me hear about it in the Facebook group, what you would use a Microsoft Azure IoT development board for, and you might get one in the mail. Thanks for watching.